In 2024, Microsoft did something no company had ever done before. It signed a 20-year deal to bring a dead nuclear reactor back from the grave. And the reason why is quietly the most important story in the market right now. The plant was a shuttered unit at 3 Mile Island. Yes, that 3 Mile Island. 835 megawatts of carbon-free power, restarted for a single customer to feed one thing, artificial intelligence. Because here's what almost nobody outside the industry understands. The thing holding back the AI boom is no longer the chips. It is the electricity to run them. And the richest companies on Earth have all figured that out at the same time. The CEO of Microsoft put it about as bluntly as you can. He said the problem isn't getting chips anymore. It's that he has chips sitting in inventory that he literally cannot plug in, because there's nowhere to get the power. This is the story of how artificial intelligence collided with the electrical grid. Who's scrambling to build the power, who's getting stuck with the bill, and exactly how you could actually invest in it. Let's get into it. First, you have to grasp the sheer scale of AI's appetite for power, because the numbers are genuinely hard to picture. Right now, all the world's data centers use about 415 terawatt-hours of electricity a year. By 2030, the International Energy Agency's central projection has that more than doubling to around 945. That is roughly as much electricity as the entire country of Japan uses today, just for data centers. And in America, it's even more concentrated. The IEA estimates that data centers will account for nearly half of all the growth in US electricity demand between now and 2030. Half from basically one industry. And the forecasts themselves can't keep up. In just 1 year, the research group EPRI raised its 2030 estimate for US data center power by 60%, not because the math changed, because the announcements kept coming in faster than anyone could model them. Here's where all that power goes. A single rack of NVIDIA's newest AI servers can draw 120 kilowatts. An old-school server rack zipped 10 to 20. The hardware didn't get a little hungrier. It got about 10 times hungrier. Zoom out to the whole building, and it gets surreal. A typical AI data center now uses as much power as a city of 100,000 homes, and the largest campuses on the drawing board need 2 gigawatts, the output of 2 full nuclear reactors, to power a single site. Now, one honest caveat, because you've probably heard the scary version. The viral stat that every ChatGPT question burns 10 times a Google search. That's basically outdated. A typical query uses about a third of a watt-hour, roughly the same as a search. The problem was never one question. It's a billion of them, every single day. Which brings us to the line that reframes the whole thing. The International Energy Agency points out that the capital spending of just 5 tech companies is now bigger than the entire world's investment in oil and gas production. Electricity has quietly become the new oil. And big tech is the new wildcatter, drilling for power. So if you're big tech and you've realized power is the bottleneck, what do? You go out and buy it, by the gigawatt, and the first place they all ran was nuclear. Microsoft's 3 Mile Island deal is the headline, and to be fair, the reactor being restarted was retired back in 2019 for economic reasons, and it is not the one from the famous 1979 accident. The restart costs about $1.6 billion. It's backed by $1 billion government loan, and it's been fast-tracked to switch on in 2027. Then there's Amazon making 2 bets at once. It put $500 million into a reactor startup to bring more than 5 gigawatts of small modular reactors online by 2039, and separately, it signed an $18 billion deal for nearly 2,000 megawatts from an existing nuclear plant in Pennsylvania. Google went a different way entirely. It placed the first ever corporate order for a whole fleet of next-generation reactors, 500 megawatts of molten salt SMRs from a company called Kairos. The catch? These reactors don't really exist at commercial scale yet. Google is funding them into existence. And Meta might be the most aggressive of all. When it asked developers for nuclear power, more than 50 of them, across over 20 states, showed up. Then, in a single January 2026 announcement, Meta lined up as much as 6.6 gigawatts of power across 3 different nuclear companies to feed one giant AI supercluster in Ohio. And notice the dates on every one of these deals. Most of these reactors don't even switch on until the early 2030s. That tells you something crucial. Big tech is not planning for a 1-year AI fad. They are locking in power for the next decade. But here's the brutal reality all this money keeps slamming into. You can sign all the power deals you want. The grid that's supposed to deliver it simply cannot be built fast enough. It comes down to a simple, devastating mismatch in timelines. You can build a giant data center in 1 to 3 years, but planning, permitting, and building the power lines and substations to feed it takes 5 to 15. The demand shows up years before the wires possibly can. And the line just to connect is already insane. There are about 2,600 gigawatts of power projects waiting in America's interconnection queue. That is roughly twice the entire amount of power plugged into the country today. And historically, only about 1 in 5 projects in that line ever actually gets built. In Northern Virginia, the data center capital of the world, the local utility now warns that hooking up a big new facility can take as long as 7 years. 7 years just to get connected to the grid. In Texas, the grid operator went from about 60 gigawatts of large power requests to over 230 in a single year, nearly 4 times bigger. More than 70% of it is data centers. The people who run the grid are simply drowning in demand. And sometimes the bottleneck isn't even the power plant. It's a metal box. The big transformers that step power up and down now take about 128 weeks to arrive, 2.5 years, and cost 77% more than in 2019. The special steel inside them has, in the entire United States, exactly one producer. Even NVIDIA's own CEO, the man selling the chips, now says the quiet part out loud. The entire industry, he says, has become power limited. The bottleneck moved from silicon to electrons, which leads to the question that is quietly turning into a political fight in living rooms across America. When big tech bids for all this scarce power, who actually ends up paying for it? Look at PJM, the largest grid operator in America, serving the mid-Atlantic. In one recent auction, the wholesale market where the grid lines up future power supply, the price exploded 833%. That's the single biggest jump in the market's 27-year history. That's not your bill directly, but it flows downhill toward it. And who drove it? Analysts estimate about 63% of that increase came from data center demand. In plain terms, that's roughly $9 billion in extra costs in a single year, working its way through the system towards someone. And it lands on your bill. Households in the region are already paying an extra $16 to $21 a month. One estimate puts the total extra cost to ordinary ratepayers at over $100 billion by 2033, to subsidize an AI boom most of them never asked for. Then, in May of 2026, it got physical. During a heat wave, the federal government invoked emergency powers to let the grid switch data centers off for 3 days to keep the lights on for everyone else. The government literally had to ration power away from AI, so the backlash has begun. More than 10 states are now writing laws to pause new data centers or to stop them shifting costs onto residents. A single data center can drink up to 5 million gallons of water a day, a small city's worth, and in a drought that turns neighbors into enemies, the grid didn't just fail to keep up with AI, it started a fight over who pays. Okay, so if power is the real bottleneck of the AI age, and it is, the obvious question for an investor becomes, how do you actually play it? And the answer is to stop staring at the chips and follow the electricity. The clearest winner so far isn't a chip stock at all. It's GE Vernova, the company that makes the gas turbines and grid gear everyone suddenly, desperately needs. Its stock is up around 55% this year, and its order backlog has blown past $163 billion. Then there's the less glamorous, maybe safer trade, the electrical plumbing. Eaton, which makes the gear that moves power around inside these buildings, saw its data center orders jump 240% in one quarter. And Quanta, the company that physically builds the grid, is sitting on a record $48 billion backlog. There's also a group of power producers that became the default AI power stocks. Constellation, which is restarting 3 Mile Island. Vistra, which signed nearly 4,000 megawatts of 20-year nuclear contracts. And Talon, with that $18 billion Amazon deal. All three re-rated violently as the deals piled up. But, and this matters, none of this is a free lunch. Take Constellation. Even with all those nuclear deals, the stock has actually fallen about 21% this year, well off its highs. That's the whole lesson in one chart. Inevitable demand does not mean a stock only goes up. The story can be right, and the price can still be wrong. And then there's the fuel itself. Long-term uranium prices have climbed to about $90 a pound, the highest since 2008. The biggest Western miner has now contracted to deliver more uranium than it currently mines. When demand outruns supply like that, prices tend to do one thing. Now, before you bet the farm on any of this, you have to take the other side seriously, because there is a real credible bear case here, and it's getting louder. Start with this jaw dropper. If you add up every announced US data center project, it comes to about 780 gigawatts of demand. That is more than the entire United States uses at its peak today, which is obviously impossible. Industry insiders quietly admit maybe 1 in 4 of those projects is actually real. And the forecasts have a credibility problem. In just 3 years, utilities raised their 5-year demand forecasts almost 7-fold. Then the actual electricity came in, and deliveries were basically flat. Somebody's models are very wrong. The government even quietly cut its own 2026 demand forecast by nearly half in a single month. And the loudest short seller on Wall Street, Michael Burry, of Big Short fame, estimates big tech could be understating its costs by roughly $176 billion through 2028 by assuming AI chips last longer than he thinks they really will. It's his projection, not a proven number, but the point is simple. If AI doesn't pay off, all of this power gets built for nothing. And even the payoff from AI is unproven. One widely cited and hotly debated MIT-linked study of more than 300 corporate AI projects claimed that 95% of them showed no measurable profit yet. Now that exact figure is contested. But even the critics agree the returns so far are thin. So the bear's question is fair. If AI isn't paying off yet, who pays for all these power plants? But here's the crucial thing. Even the skeptics aren't saying the boom is fake. They're saying it's overhyped. Strip out the fantasy projects, and the very people warning about overbuilding still expect around 140 gigawatts of real demand growth. That is not nothing. That is enormous. Morgan Stanley does the cold math. It sees about 74 gigawatts of US data center demand by 2028, and roughly 49 gigawatts of that has nowhere to plug in. Whether the high forecast or the low ones are right, the gap between what AI wants and what the grid can deliver is real, and it's huge. So here's where it all nets out. The question was never whether AI needs more power. It clearly does. The real question, the one this entire decade turns on, is simpler and scarier. Can we build the grid faster than we build the models? And if you want to invest in the answer, there are really three honest ways to do it. 1, the equipment, the companies making the turbines, transformers and wires. 2, the power producers, the ones who actually own the electrons. And 3, the fuel, uranium, and the miners who dig it. Each one is a different bet on the very same idea. The most valuable companies on Earth just told you what keeps them up at night. It isn't chips anymore, it's power. And whoever solves that bottleneck may capture the most valuable scarcity of the decade. If this finally made the AI power crunch click for you, do me a favor and follow Market Minute. Next time I'll break down exactly which of these power bets the smart money's making right now. I'll see you there.